You might have heard the buzz. Some people are calling it the mother of all deals, and for good reason. After more than a decade of back and forth, two of the world's economic giants, India and the European Union, have finally locked in a massive free trade agreement. Now, this isn't just another trade pact. It's a deal that could seriously reshape how global trade works. So today, we're going to break it all down and figure out what it means for everyone involved. So here's how we'll do it. First, we'll unpack why this deal is being called historic. Then we'll dive into who the big winners are on both sides. After that, we'll get into the fine print, what's in, and just as important, what's out. Then we'll look at how this is really more than just a trade agreement. And finally, we'll see what actually has to happen before any of this becomes official. All right, so why all the hype? What makes this deal so historic? Well, it's not just about the numbers. Just listen to the language leaders and analysts are using. They're talking about this partnership in some pretty epic terms. I mean, right off the bat, it was nicknamed the mother of all deals. And look, that isn't just clever marketing. It really reflects the enormous scale and, frankly, the economic weight of the two partners sitting at the table. And here they are, the key players at that historic moment. You've got Indian Prime Minister Modi with EU leaders. This isn't just a quick photo op. This picture really captures the end of years of stalled talks and some pretty intense recent negotiations, finally bringing these two major global powers together. And to really get a sense of the scale here, just look at this number. Together, India and the EU, they make up nearly a quarter of the world's entire GDP. That's the kind of economic firepower we're talking about. A partnership this massive is guaranteed to send some serious ripples through the global economy. But, getting here was a marathon, not a sprint. The first talks actually kicked off way back in 2007. But then they hit a wall and stalled for almost a decade over some major disagreements. It took a huge push to get them going again in 2022, which finally led to the deal we have today. It has been a long, long road. Okay, so a historic deal is signed, but what does it actually mean in practice? Let's take a look at the big winners and break down who really stands to gain the most from all of this. What's really interesting is that this deal seems to offer some pretty big, balanced wins for both sides. For India, it means huge access for key exports like textiles and leather. And in return, Europe gets some major tariff cuts on products they're famous for, things like cars, wine, and all sorts of industrial machinery. Let's just zoom in on one of those wins. For India, the textile and apparel sector is a massive, massive beneficiary. With zero-duty access to the EU's enormous market, analysts are predicting that Indian apparel exports could see their annual growth jump from around 3% to as high as 20 or even 25%. That's a total game changer. And on the flip side, for Europe, the opportunity is just huge. I mean, just look at these tariff drops. The duty on cars imported into India is set to plummet from over 100% all the way down to just 10%. And for wine, it falls from a staggering 150% down to 30%. This just blows open one of the world's largest consumer markets for European brands. But with any major agreement like this, the real story is in the details. The benefits are obviously vast, but to truly understand what's going on, we need to look at what was included, and maybe just as importantly, what was left on the negotiating table. So the EU is going to see tariffs cut on over 90% of its exports to India, which is huge. Meanwhile, India secures that duty-free access for key sectors and makes it easier for its skilled professionals to work in Europe. But the exclusions are also really telling. Sensitive farm products like chicken and rice, off the table. And there's no agreement on opening up government contracts to foreign bidders either. And what that really shows is that both sides drew some pretty clear red lines. They were very careful to shield certain sensitive domestic industries, especially in agriculture, from the deal. It just goes to show you the careful balancing act it took to get something this massive across the finish line. But here's the thing. This agreement is about so much more than just tariffs and quotas. If you look at the timing and the whole geopolitical context, it reveals a much bigger, much more strategic play by both India and the European Union. This quote from the official statements, I think, really gets to the heart of it. Leaders on both sides see this economic partnership as a way to create stability in what's become an increasingly turbulent world. It's really about forging a reliable alliance between major democracies. When you look at the real drivers behind the deal, it becomes crystal clear. This is a direct response to all the global uncertainty and conflict we're seeing. It's about reducing strategic dependency on other nations. It's about strengthening the ties between democratic powers. And it's even about boosting security cooperation. The economic deal, that's just the foundation for a much deeper geopolitical partnership.
So, the deal is done. The handshakes are over. But what happens now? In our final section, let's look at the pretty complex path this agreement has to take before it actually goes into effect.
Which brings us to a simple but really important question. Is this deal law? Well, the short answer is no. Not yet. The signing was a huge step, for sure, but it's really just the beginning of the final phase.
The road ahead is actually pretty complex. First, lawyers have to scrub the whole document, finalizing every last legal detail. Then it has to be translated into the official language of every single EU member state. From there, it needs approval from the entire European Parliament. And then it has to be ratified by the national government of all 27 individual EU countries. It's a serious bureaucratic gauntlet to get through. So, given all those steps, the general thinking is that the agreement will probably come into force sometime around 2025. So while the deal itself has been finalized, we're still a little ways off from actually seeing these changes take effect on the ground.
And that brings us to our final thought. As global alliances are shifting and supply chains are being completely redrawn,